pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everyone, for attending tonight. Donna, would you call the roll, please?
I will. Councilmember Dorsey.
Here.
Councilmember Inesco.
Here.
Councilmember Krantz.
Here.
Mayor Rogers.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Peterson. Here. Councilmember McDowell.
Present.
Councilmember Schmidt.
Here.
Okay, any changes, additions to the agenda tonight? Okay, I'm going to make one slight one. City Manager Knighton has some introductions to make, so we're going to start off with those.
Okay.
Jeff?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm privileged tonight to be able to introduce two new employees to the City of Shelton, and then I'll turn it over to Chief Moody to introduce our third employee. The first person I'd like to introduce is Aaron B. Miller. He has accepted the position of the Director of Financial Services for Shelton. Has a tremendous amount of experience and will help us a great deal moving forward with budget development and investments and those other types of activities. So, Aaron?
Sure. Good evening, Council. Happy to be here. I've been here, a week and a day. Already getting my feet wet. Have a fantastic financial services staff, and everybody at the city already has been just amazing. So just want to say hello and look forward to working with you all.
Okay.
All right.
Welcome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Aaron.
And the second one, second employee, we met a little bit at our last council meeting, but tonight is formal introduction for Leandra Sharp, and she's going to be helping Donna, our city clerk, with some of the clerk's duties and helping out with some community development stuff as well. She does not want to get up and speak, so she'll just stand and wave.
Hello. Welcome, Leandra.
But we're happy to have her, and she is very definitely helping us with the production of minutes from some of the meetings from last year. You have two sets of minutes, I think, in your packet this evening that will double or more for our next meeting. So we're getting caught up on that. And then Chief Moody.
Good evening, Council. I'd like to introduce Shannon Watanabe, who is our new Code Enforcement / Animal Control or Community Service Officer with us here. She comes to us from DOC with 11 years experience at DOC, so I think she's well within her realm to deal with code enforcement in this area. She's hit the ground running, been here 3 weeks now? Almost 3 weeks. And she's already started sending out letters, starting case files, issuing code enforcement complaints. And we look forward to working a long time together on getting some of this stuff done. So I just wanted to introduce Shannon to you all.
Okay.
Welcome.
Shannon.
Welcome, Shannon.
I do not want to speak either.
Thank you, City Manager and Chief. Okay, next we'll start with council reports, and I'll start with Councilmember Schmidt this evening.
Good evening. Last week attended the monthly EDC Economic Development Council Board meeting, as well as the MACECOM Governance and Legislative Board meeting, and staff bi-weekly briefings. And that is my briefing.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember McDowell.
Staff briefing last Friday. Met with a couple of constituents here last week. Next week, I'll be attending the Capital Land Trust breakfast at St. Martin's Pavilion. And the theme this year is connecting with our community. So that should be very interesting. And we'll be having a meeting with a communication consultant next week. And that's my weeks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Peterson.
In addition to briefings, I had several constituents call, email, and drop off letters to me last week on a variety of topics. I've been coordinating with city staff on those. I have my Peninsula Regional Transportation Project Organization meeting this Friday at the Bremerton Airport. This Thursday is also Chamber, which I also work there, Chamber Luncheon with Roadwork and Construction Projects, which the city will be presenting at. Next week, we have the Capital Land Trust breakfast that City Manager Knighton and I will be attending along with Green Diamond. a meeting with the communications consultant, and our upcoming budget retreat.
Thank you. Upcoming meetings include Crossways Boards meeting at the end of the month, and also we'll be attending opening day boating season down at the Yacht Club on Saturday the 27th, and they're encouraging people to come down if you would like to participate. So, Councilmember Kranz.
Just staff briefings, meeting with people. We got a council retreat on April 26th. And also tomorrow morning, I will be attending my monthly criminal justice board meeting.
Councilmember Nisco.
Besides briefings and meetings, I have a behavioral health advisory board meeting tomorrow and a chamber lunch on Thursday. I've been receiving lots of calls and confrontations about road work, and I refer them to our wonderful public works director and our city manager.
Very good. Councilmember Dorsey.
All right, since our last council meeting, I had a maintenance and operations meeting with Mason County Transit. Along with everybody else, we'll be attending the budget retreat at the end of the month. There's also another Mason Transit meeting coming up on the 23rd that I'm going to make it if I can. And coming up on the 1st, I don't know if you were going to talk about this or not, but we have our spotlight. So if you can, and that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. This opens our first general public comment period. Individuals have 3 minutes to comment on non-agenda items. And when you come forward, please state your name and whether you're a city resident or not. And Donna?
Randy Lewis.
Hi, everybody. Randy Lewis. I'm a resident inside the Shelton urban growth area. I'm still a little disturbed about the safety argument with respect to the Veterans Tiny Homes project in my neighborhood. I resent the assertion that the tenants will automatically be lowlifes that we should avoid at all costs. So you don't feel safe walking next to the tiny homes after they're built? Do you know where I feel unsafe walking around? Walmart, downtown. I personally intend to track incidence numbers for these and other areas once the tiny homes is built. Again, I suggest some of the community visionaries get their act together downtown before circling around empty plots in my neighborhood. Maybe some of us like driving along a Brockdale Road with a beautiful forest. This is a vision to turn Brockdale into Martin Way. Not for many of us. That being said, I have come to praise Joe Schmidt, not to bury him. It would have been very easy for Joe to take the easy way out and go along with a unanimous vote approving the tiny homes. Too many times in our community, I've seen elected officials vote on an issue not based on the merits, but on personalities. An elected official in our community recently voted on an issue to support a fellow commissioner only. He in effect said to an objector in the crowd that, "Oh, I agree with you, but I'm going to support my fellow commissioner." We call that his Al Gore moment. He voted for it before he voted against it. This approach makes that commission look weaker, not stronger. Next time I see a unanimous vote out of that commission, I will wonder, is this for real or just a stunt to falsely demonstrate solidarity? I personally violently object to this philosophy. The elected officials' first, second, and third loyalty belongs not to fellow elected officials, not to the bureaucracy, but to the citizens. Who looks good, who looks bad, who is pleased, who is displeased, is irrelevant. Vote your conscience based on the merits. I'm convinced Joe Schmidt truly believes that the process and resulting approval of the Tiny Homes project does not serve our community well. I don't agree with Joe on this issue, but I applaud his vote. By voting his conscience, Joe Schmidt served our community well. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Okay. That closes our first general comment period. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as published?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as published.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as published. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is accepted. Okay, next, we move on to Community Development Director Mark Ziegler is going to speak about Arbor Day.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I'm pleased to announce that the city has been again recognized as a Tree City USA recipient. With that comes a proclamation for Arbor Day, which is April 26th, 2019. Just some of the criteria that the city goes through to be designated a tree city. We have to have a tree board, essentially, so that's our Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee that serves as the tree board. We have to have a work plan in how we maintain and manage our trees within the public. And then we have to spend at least $2 per capita per tree. Right now, we're spending just over $3 per capita per tree. And that's our normal maintenance. So that's pruning, removal, storm cleanup, leaf cleanup, and everything that goes associated with maintaining our street trees and other trees in our public rights-of-ways and properties, as well as how we manage the removal and planting of trees. I think we removed under the term of 2018, which is the process of being recognized as a tree city going into 19, about 6 trees within the city's purveyance, but added 31 trees mainly through the Downtown Connector project. So that's some of the criteria that we have provided to the Arbor Day Foundation and Tree City USA Foundation, and proclamation that will be read tonight will be one other step in recognizing the importance of our trees in our community.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I'll just add this personal note, as being from Nebraska, and I don't know if people know that Arbor Day started in Nebraska City, Nebraska, and I visited their site. It's an old historical estate, and that estate started the Arbor Day Foundation, and it's a beautiful place if you get a chance to go there. So the proclamation, City of Shelton proclamation. Whereas trees and forest products have played a vital role in the history of the city of Shelton, and whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, and countless other wood products, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas the presence of trees throughout the city contributes to the natural beauty and livability of the community as a whole. And whereas the celebration of Arbor Day is a longstanding tradition for cities that wish to display their support of trees in the community. Now therefore, the Shelton City Council does hereby proclaim April 26, 2019, Arbor Day in the city of Shelton, and urge all its citizens to continue to recognize the importance of trees in our community and express this through the recognition and celebration of Arbor Day. This will be signed today, the 16th day of April 2019. So thank you, Mark, for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Are we planting a tree in honor of Arbor Day?
We're going to go out and do it right now.
We have to have a tree
We
first.
don't have a specific ceremony in place, but there are some trees being planted on Alder in
Yes.
the Downtown Connector project.
Okay, just wondering. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to our business agenda. Is there anyone signed up for any of our business?
No, there's not, Mayor.
All right.
I don't want to pay him.
So our,
Yeah.
Councilmember Schmidt?
No,
Oh, okay. First business agenda item is Community Development. Mark Ziegler has information about the appointment to the Arts Commission.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Recently, the city of Shelton advertised for applicants for the Shelton Arts Commission. We had an opening recently. We received one applicant from Coco Chang, who's a new resident in the city of Shelton, has a history of volunteerism and public art, and has met with the Arts Commission, and they feel like that she'd be a great addition to that committee. As you know, the Arts Commission's projects annually are the rotating art gallery here in the Civic Center and the Empty Bowls project, and most recently the downtown, or not just downtown, but the traffic signal box wraps that were in partnership with the Martha Reed Foundation at 3 different locations throughout the community. So we look forward to filling out that advisory committee with your approval, and put Ms. Chang to work right away. If you would consider foregoing the 3-touch rule tonight and appointing her, she can get started with the Arts Commission right away.
Okay. And we've talked about this for certain items, to just move these type items forward. Any issues with that tonight?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
So do we have a motion?
I move to appoint Coco Chang to the Shelton Arts Commission for a term ending on December 31st, 2019.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion?
I would just like to say, I really was moved by the letter that she sent into you, Mark, and I was excited to see the enthusiasm she shares with the rest of the members on the commission, and look forward to seeing them getting into action.
All right, we have a motion to appoint Coco Chang to the Shelton Arts Commission for a term ending December 31st, 2019. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Back to Director Ziegler for information about appointments to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee.
Thank you. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee kind of followed the same schedule. We advertised for residents for appointment to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. This is a committee that had no members at this point. Through attrition with staff and attrition with the advisory committee, all 5 of the positions were open. So today, I'm bringing you 4 of those appointments. We received letters of interest from 4 individuals, including Kim Oliver, who actually served on the advisory committee previously, Thea Wheeler, Deborah Dozier, and Sue Patterson. And it's really important timing to get this committee up and running again, as we are in the middle of our Parks, Recreation, Open Space Planning project, and really want that community feedback and that guidance from residents within this community to help us through that process. So I, again, am asking for a waiver of the 3-touch rule so we can put these volunteers to work as soon as possible and appoint them tonight with your approval.
Hearing objections to moving this forward for a vote?
None.
Do I have a motion?
I move to appoint Kim Oliver, Thea Wheeler, Deborah Dozier, and Sue Patterson to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for 3-year terms through December 31st, 2021.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion or questions? Okay, we have a motion to appoint Kim Oliver, Thea Wheeler, Deborah Dozier, and Sue Patterson to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for a 3-year term through December 31st, 2021. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next.
Can I comment on?
You sure may.
The boxes look great. In fact, they're a little bit of a hazard because you're driving and you're like, looking at them. So a little distraction, but they're beautiful. Hopefully we'll have more.
It's certainly
Without the
under
hazard.
consideration.
Not the hazard
Yeah,
part.
not the hazard part.
More of the boxes. They look great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Okay, next up, Court Administrator Diane Smolinski is here to talk about the interlocal agreement with the Mason County Jail Services.
Good evening, Council. Diane Smolinski, Court Administrator. Tonight on the business agenda is the interlocal agreement with Mason County Jail Services with the City of Shelton. In December of 2018, Mason County Sheriff's Office presented the City of Shelton with a new proposed version of the 2019 interlocal agreement for use of jail services. After some negotiation, City and County came to an agreement on the 2019 ILA, which was signed by County Commission on March 26th. In addition to contracting with Mason County for jail services, we also contract with the City of Forks as well. Whenever possible, inmates who have sentences to serve for municipal court will be sent to Forks Jail to serve their time. The contract with Forks, they come down here and pick them up at either in the court lobby or at Mason County Jail. No charge for them to pick them up and take them up there. And the daily rate at Forks is $48 and I think it's 87 cents. So we do try to use them for longer-term sentences. Let's see. So the 2019 flat monthly rate for 7 guaranteed beds at Mason County Jail will remain the same at $21,717.50 per month, or $260,610 annually. The new agreement allows for an increase in the daily rate to house the high needs inmates, which will increase from $125 per day to $150 per day for those inmates. Additionally, any inmate held by multiple courts is not included in the guaranteed 7 beds for the city, and therefore the daily rate for those people is $102 per day shared between each court that's holding them. The extra cost of high needs and shared inmates will continue to be billed on a quarterly basis by the Mason County Sheriff's Office, and that's in addition to what we're paying now. So, staff recommends that this be placed on the action agenda for May 7th and be signed by the council at that time. Do you have any questions?
The 102 that's shared by, is that 102 each, or?
It's 102 each, yes, per day, yes.
Well, that's $204.
So the way it works is it's $102 a day, but if there's 2 courts holding, then that 102 is split between each court. 3 courts, sometimes there's 4, sometimes there's 3 courts and DOC. So that cost goes down, but the cost is in addition to our 7 beds that get paid monthly. So, the court tries to minimize those for the city, those costs, by releasing the hold on the inmates that have other courts holding them, because they're going to be there anyway. So I know that Judge Greer emphasizes that. If he can, he will release them to help with that cost. So.
And is this contract solid? The last one that we had, it could be canceled with 90 days notice from either side for any reason?
It's the same, yeah.
It's the same.
Yep. Councilmember Dorsey, do you have a question?
Yeah, just for those that don't know or haven't heard, how are those inmates transported to Forks?
So they have a van, and a lot of times the jail sergeant or other officers at the jail will do transports. They come down in a jail van, and they make the rounds.
Who's they?
The
Forks?
Forks jail
Forks.
officers, yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and a lot of times, like I was saying, they'll make a circle. So they'll go around and pick up at other agencies also, other courts, so, in
Thank you.
jails.
Well, I sit on the Criminal Justice Committee and have for 7 years, and we are continuing to have the conversation about the need for more jail bed space. And I do know that our Police Chief Darren Moody has been very instrumental in continuing to try and, help in us and with the county trying to figure this out. And it appears that we are getting closer to possibly, and I don't know how much is public or not, but we're in negotiations with another county to possibly come together and build a joint jail that will help Mason County and the city of Shelton. And so we are talking about that. We're having consultants look into that, and that we need more jail space, period. And so, this is maybe not the perfect of all solutions, but we talk about it every month and have for 7 years. And we are getting closer to making some possible arrangements to where there might be more jail bed space available if we can come to getting a facility built, and maybe sharing it with another county would help in cost and administration of that facility. So, but it's been a long conversation, and it looks like we might be getting closer to doing something.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilmember Schmidt.
Just a comment, just to extend my appreciation. I understand that this has been a royal pain, right? That was kind of the way it was placed on us, but I know that the city staff, you guys have dealt with this. Let's hope that our residents of the city are on their best behaviors this next year. But thanks for going through this and getting this established. It's unfortunately, at this point, is our only reasonable option in Forks, outside of getting into the jail business, which that doesn't pencil out. So, but thanks for your effort on this.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, everyone concur to move this ahead to the action item for May 5th, correct?
7th.
7th, thank you. May 7th. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we go to Public Works Director Craig Gregory to give us details about the purchase of a Vector truck.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Purchase of a very expensive but much needed Vector truck. This was approved through the budget process in preparing for 2019. We prepared bid documents that went out the first couple of weeks of March and had a bid opening March 21st. And the two superintendents of Public Works, Mike Alba, Brent Armstrong, along with their staff, and speccing out this truck and thinking of efficiencies and how to move forward with the best way possible, especially moving into the Phase 2 stormwater permit and the requirements that come with that, and looking for manpower efficiencies through equipment. And they did a great job of speccing this truck out before we went to bid. And just to give some context of what this truck is used for, along with the Vector truck that we already have, through sewer pipe cleaning. We have over 50 miles of sewer pipe within the city of Shelton that we try to clean on an annual basis. Portions of town, we've segregated that up into about a 5-year cycle of cleaning, not only cleaning, but cammering also, that the Vector truck is needed for in the sewer activities. But more talking about the Phase 2 permit, we have over 1,600 catch basins within the city of Shelton that will now be required to be cleaned and inspected every other year. So every 2 years, those will all need to be vacked out and inspected, along with 350 dry wells, 191 culverts, and over 30 miles of storm pipe within the city of Shelton. A pretty good undertaking to not only clean all of those, but camera and inspect all of those every other year. So much needed equipment, along with 30 outfalls that we have into waterways around Shelton. So back to that bid process and speccing that truck out. We had a very wide range of bids that we received. We received 4 bids. Only one met the criteria of the bid specs. The others fell short in quite a few areas, some less than others. But to give you some context, the 4 bids ranged from $452,000 all the way up to $513,000. So pretty wide range between the 4 of them, with the bid at $513,000 meeting all of the bid spec requirements. We did budget $525,000 for this through the budget process, so well under the budgeted amount, along with about $1,800 to outfit this truck once it actually hits our facility, with radios, logos, lights, things like that need to go on it. The estimate that we got from our mechanic that will be installing all of that was about $1,800. So still under budget, even with those things that need to be fitted onto that truck and that piece of equipment once we get it. But thinking about those efficiencies, just looking at it, Chuck is going to play a couple of quick videos that demonstrate one of the biggest things that was spec'd out with this truck, and one of the most expensive things that nobody else could meet as far as a bid or spec requirement, is the rapid deployment piece of this equipment that only Owen Equipment was able to provide. So Chuck is going to play that video for us, and it will show, you'll see some of those efficiencies that come out of that. No sound, apparently, but I'm not.
I'd say it's awful quiet.
I'm not able to see what is actually going on, without turning around and looking at the TV. But I know this first video really shows work underneath power lines and things like that. And what this brings is the Vactor truck that we have now, new technology. Before, we were connecting 6 to 7 foot pipes together with a locking cam lock connector. But the problem is, every time you go from one catch basin to the next, you can't just lift this boom up and drive down the street. You've got power lines, you've got street lights, things like that, that you need to disconnect all of these, stack them back on the rack, and go to the next catch basin. You can see how much that would take going from catch basin to catch basin 1,600 times every other year. The next video it really does a good job of illustrating kind of those efficiencies. If Chuck will play that next one, it shows a time lapse of 2 workers trying to do the same job of connecting or getting out enough pipe to actually get down into these catch basins, and the efficiencies that brings over that time period.
That was what we just saw.
He showed.
I think that's one we just.
Yeah.
saw.
Did you show both of? Yes.
Both trucks.
Okay.
He's shown both.
Okay. So you saw the 2 workers there side by side that were working together. The rapid deployment system that runs about $20,000 above and beyond what would be the cam lock connector. So you can really see those 2 side by side working together, of going through 1,600 catch basins, of how much time that would actually take from one to the next. Yeah. There are certain cases where you could, take off 1 or 2 of the pipes and travel between catch basins, but most likely you're going to have to disconnect all of them, put that boom away, put the pipes away, go to the next catch basin, and then reattach everything again. So that is the big discrepancy really in the cost, is a lot of those efficiencies that we have with some of those things we spec'd out, and also some safety aspects on the truck. Some of these trucks have tanks, water tanks, that stick out and protrude further outside of the truck. The Owen Equipment really stacked them inside the body of the truck, which was a great safety aspect. Just traveling down the road, parking it, whatever it might be, that you don't have these plastic or aluminum tanks that are sticking out. Another big thing is the difference between a plastic tank and an aluminum tank. We did spec out all aluminum on this, which is much better, especially in our environment, freezing, other things. We try to park that truck inside most of the winter, but leave a plastic tank out full of water and it's going to expand and crack. You don't really get that unless you get a really full tank that freezes with aluminum. So a lot of those things, not only efficiencies, but safety aspects also. And I would be happy to answer any questions. I know this is a very large purchase, but something that is much needed.
I have one.
Questions, comments?
A couple. Greg, I was watching that video on the truck on the right, which was the truck that you were talking about. You have to stack the cans and band them together, or tubes or whatever. Obviously, there's one in the truck and there's one person doing that. So that's 2. Will there still be 2 people probably on the new truck, on the other truck?
Yes.
Because somebody's got to be there.
Yes. And it's kind of a dual function with both of those. One person really acts as a spotter to get set up, and then once we get it set up with the new Phase 2 permit, one person will be cleaning, likely, and sometimes with the catch basin, you have to use, it's almost like a pressure washer wand to break up the material. But as the material gets broken up, as soon as that employee is going to put that water jet away, they're gonna have to document the catch basin that they're at, what they did to it, how much debris was in it, and also, in this first couple of years that we start cleaning catch basins, we're also going to be GPSing each location to document the location, what pipes are in and out of that catch basin. So that other employee that's maybe not running the actual Vector truck is going to have his or her hands full also
Correct.
documenting and also GPSing each location.
So the real time saving basically is getting from one to another, and the setup time
Yes, absolutely.
and the tear down time.
Yes.
And how many, I mean, today, how many catch basins can you do? I know, I don't know if you're out there all day, or if you're out there for a few hours a day, but
No, when we start
but
cleaning
it'll obviously
in
cut
January-
it down a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you looked at that video, I don't remember what the actual time difference was between the two.
It was quite a bit.
But if it were a couple of minutes times 1,600 just on
Right.
catch basins, that's a significant amount of time times two.
So that's what I'm getting at, is time saved
Yes.
is money earned,
Yes,
basically.
absolutely.
Yeah. How about in the cleaning of that tube is kind of like a slinky tube, if you will, that comes out and then it retracts. How do you, I mean, there must be some cleaning or some kind of way to clean that, or do you have, what's the maintenance on that, do you think?
Normally, there's not a lot of maintenance
Yeah.
within the hose, other than when it wears out.
Okay.
There's an aluminum ball in there that when you turn the actual Vector on, it sucks up against it to actually create the vacuum. But really, other than that, there's not, other than wear and tear on a piece of equipment like this, there's not a lot of cleaning.
Okay.
One thing that we did identify through keeping the old truck, and we are proposing to keep the old truck in operation. But one thing that we talked about internally was keeping the old truck more as a sewer activity piece of equipment. Because when we go from cleaning and vacuuming sewer, we go and dump that at the vac pad down at the sewer plant. Well, then you have to go through an extensive cleaning of the tank to then go out and do a storm cleaning where that material is going to another location for disposal. So we have to do a very extensive cleaning. So we're going to designate the older truck to mainly just the sewer department, to keep that truck for that activity, and then hydro excavation and storm cleaning for the newer truck, so that we're not cross-contaminating those, which will also create some very good efficiencies by not having to clean that tank out
Yeah.
every time we're using it, because you do have to clean it out every time you use it, because once you use it for sewer, you never know who the next user is going to be. So all of a sudden, we go and do hydro excavation, that should be clean material that we can use for backfill, things like that. We don't want, sewer contaminants in that. So every time those staff members use that truck, they have to clean it out.
Yeah.
So just dividing those and trying not to cross-contaminate those unless we have, an emergency situation, which we may have, where we need both of them. It'll create some real efficiencies by just keeping those in their own separate departments or uses.
Good.
Other questions?
Just one.
Deputy
On a
Mayor.
replacement schedule, what would we anticipate the life of this vehicle to be?
We are anticipating so kind of a two-pronged question. The old truck, we're estimating to be about a 20-year life cycle, just because it didn't have the extensive use that this one is going to have early on. But now with this truck, we're estimating it'll be about a 15-year life cycle, just because of the overall use with the Phase 2 permit. It is going to be utilized much more than the older truck. It will take a little bit of use off of or strain off of it by designating one to sewer, the older truck to sewer. So I think best case scenario, you could look at a 20-year life cycle, but most likely you're probably looking at about the 15-year term.
And clarification, the current truck is 12 years old?
It
13,
is,
12
correct.
years.
It was purchased in 2007.
Question, go ahead.
Now, with that 15-year lifespan, you're not anticipating loaning this to the fire department for any reason, right? Because there's a representative back here. Once he heard about a new $500,000 truck, I'm sure his mind was thinking of all of the creative things they could use that for.
We do like to be good community partners, so if Mike were to need our assistance, we would be there in a second to help him out.
All right, but we don't want to overwear our truck out.
But we get the fire truck, right?
Whoa. There's got to be a trade and barter in this one.
Councilmember Schmidt.
This is an area in my full-time work that I understand very well. This is almost the exact same tactic that the State Department of Transportation uses to, when we're under the same basic permit requirements to inspect 100% of our known stormwater system inventory every single year. And this is basically the most efficient way to do it. If you were not, and you were sending somebody around in a pickup truck to inspect every single catch basin, they're having to pull the lid off, check inside the basin, and all of that time you could have been cleaning it and maintaining it right then and there. And I'm very supportive of this method. The other piece is under the Phase 2 permit, understand that anything on the state highway will become city responsibility. And that needs to be assessed as well. So that 1,600 inventory may be a little bit higher. I'm not sure. You may have already been maintaining it. I'm not sure. But that's also kind of part of that process as well. So having the appropriate equipment to do that is another important piece. And then lastly, I do also know that the Department of Ecology demonstrating performance of the stormwater assets over time. If we're out cleaning and inspecting these catch basins every 2 years, or whatever the requirements are, and once we can demonstrate that certain catch basins or certain stormwater facilities are performing at a high level, meaning they're clean all the time, do you know if that's workable within those requirements, that we can maybe extend those inspection periods out 5 years or 6 years or something like that? Do you know if that's been discussed?
It is. We have discussed that with them, and that is certainly a possibility.
So then
to demonstrate that. And we have already started doing that. As you mentioned, we do clean a lot of the ones on the state highway already, and we already have a lot of the first couple of years worth of requirements for the Phase 2 permit. We're already doing those.
Great.
We've already got a cleaning and cammering program, which we do every other year. So we're already doing a lot of those activities, so.
Great. One of the things that Ecology will definitely enjoy looking at is all of that data. So it comes back to how are we collecting that data once we're out at the catch basin doing the inspection? Is that like a canned form? Is that the Western Washington Stormwater Manual guidance, or are we using like an electronic system of some sort?
It's definitely going to be an electronic system. We are not going to do paper copies that we have to store or enter in when we get back. We're gonna have some sort of handheld device, whether it be a laptop or a tablet, that we can enter all of that stuff on, along with the GPS coordinates and the data that we're putting into the Trimble.
Fantastic.
So,
Go ahead.
so I don't quite understand, if it's on state highway, why the city does take that. Do you have an answer for that?
There are requirements per your population of what you actually do. And then there's also a certain unwritten requirement that you maintain things that are within the city that maybe don't get maintained on a regular basis, that it's easier for us that if we're going from Lake Boulevard up to Fairmont Street and there's 5 catch basins on the state highway in between there, that we go ahead and take care of those and clean those. It's a partnership that I think is well acted out and demonstrated between not only us but the state and that partnership with them. There are quite a few things that maintaining guardrails and things like that they also do for us that we really don't have the facilities or mechanism to to, or inventory to even maintain things like guardrails on state highways that they do. So
Okay.
it's a pretty good partnership and trade-off.
All right.
Actually, on that front, I'm glad you brought that up. There's actually an avenue and a way for us to collect some funding related to municipal stormwater fees with state highways that run through it. We can actually send the state DOT a bill, not necessarily for that work, but for the overall stormwater system maintenance. And I don't know, that's something we've talked about. And if you've been paying attention to the legislature, I know that they're trying to backpedal from that a little bit because it's costing the state money. But the requirements are pretty loose in terms of that. But for example, there are several municipalities in the state of Washington that send the state DOT a bill just because there's a state highway that runs through their city, whether they're actually doing anything with stormwater or not. That's not my intention, but it would be, if there is an impact, a financial impact to the city, that we should be working with the DOT to make that even, to keep that as a net zero.
And that has been an internal discussion.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Craig, couple questions on the current truck.
Sure.
How many total hours you put on a year, and of that, how much is due to stormwater? And then what, do you have an anticipation of what the workload will be in future years?
I don't have actual stormwater numbers. I do have overall Vector numbers. Now, whether that was, we have done, I don't have that information. I certainly can try to get a little better number for you. But overall, right now, the total hours on the Vector truck, and this could be, I mean, this is a range between hydro excavation, between all of the departments, sewer cleaning, and storm. But over 12 years, the Vector truck has a little over 5,100 hours on it over a 12-year period. Very high hour use, very low mileage. It's only got about 20,000 miles on it over 12 years. So doesn't travel a whole lot other than dumping debris really, throughout the city. It doesn't do much traveling. So pretty high hours, but low miles. But to break those up and be able to tell you that X amount of hours went to just stormwater would be a little difficult to get. We could get it. It would take some time because we do fill out use records down at the shop. Anytime we use a piece of equipment, we track it. We've started doing that over the last, just over the last 3 years or so.
I know Gordon's here, so he'll probably quote you anyway, but you have an estimate?
I do not.
Half? Or you don't want to even say?
I couldn't even,
Okay.
I couldn't even guess at this point. Without going back and really trying to look at the numbers over the last 4 or 5 years, I would be guessing.
And have you penciled out hours you think going to use the truck in future years for stormwater, based on the new requirements?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not done an estimate on total man hours. We are going to be diving into that very soon, just ramping up for the 2020 budget. Because obviously with more use of a Vector truck like we're talking about today, staffing levels are very low in the stormwater department, not only for boots on the ground, but also technical staff of a stormwater, some sort of stormwater specialist or a stormwater engineer that is going to have to tackle going out, public engagement, because not only are we required to clean and maintain our own system, but we're also required to track the cleaning and maintenance of private systems. So that's something that's coming. We're going to have to do a very good job of communications and public relations to get the word out that that's coming. All of a sudden, we're walking onto a private either business or whatever it might be and saying, hey, we're here to inspect your stormwater facilities. And if somebody doesn't know we're coming, I'm guessing that's probably not going to be well received. So yeah, we're going to need to do an analysis before we get to actual budget time of what the staffing needs are. But likely they're going to be significant. And that's really the reason for right now of going through the stormwater rate study, is looking at those. And FCS Group is doing a great job of helping us look at those staffing numbers and what other cities are doing. So we're working with FCS Group right now, so we should have a pretty decent idea here in the next month or two.
Okay, thanks.
A couple other things that just kind of The permit isn't specific to the city limits. It is specific to the UGA. So do we have stormwater facilities outside of the city limits in the UGA that we'll have to be maintaining?
We do not.
We do not.
We do not.
There may be some private facilities, but
There
not
likely are,
public.
sorry, yes,
Yeah.
there likely are some private facilities, absolutely. But nothing that's city-owned outside of the city limits in the UGA, at least that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But absolutely.
My last question was just related to training staff. Is that in-house? Do you do that in terms of training up other staff to operate the equipment?
We do.
Okay.
Currently, we have 13 operators qualified and 3 truck drivers that are qualified to run that. So a total of 16 Public Works employees that are trained and authorized to use that piece of equipment.
Very good.
And that's just the operator piece of it. You certainly could have an operator with a lower paid maintenance worker, which is normally what happens. The lower paid maintenance worker would be the person likely trying to break up the material, documenting, using the GPS, or Trimble to document everything with an operator. So it's not like we're sending 2 operators out at the same time. Normally, it's an operator and a maintenance worker that would go out and do those activities.
Okay. Further questions? Okay, thanks, Craig.
You're welcome.
Okay, do we concur to move this forward to the May 7th meeting? All right?
Yes.
Yep.
Back to Director Gregory for the road rating program.
So, thank you, Mayor and council members. Again, a very large undertaking with road rating. Very large undertaking with a very, very small staff. Right now, with having just 2 employees in our engineering staff, they worked on this and got this together in a fairly timely fashion. It has taken us about 6 to 8 months to pull this together. It was one of my goals when I first took over almost 3 years ago now, that we would get this in place so that we had an idea of why we were going out and paving or maintaining certain roads, and had justification to also back up why we were doing certain roads and the activities that we were doing out there. We have neglected, I feel, our roads for a significant amount of time. We haven't done a lot of great maintenance. And when you don't do a lot of maintenance on your roadways, they are very expensive. The difference between doing some crack sealing or chip sealing as a comparison to doing a full reconstruction is, on a block of roadway, you're talking about not thousands of dollars, you're talking about tens of thousands. If you let that road deteriorate to a point where you have to do reconstruction on it. And that is something with even our projects that we have done. We haven't done a great job of actually going out and maintaining what we've had, and I think it shows. So this is a way to make sure that we are doing that, and being able to justify what we're actually doing and have a plan moving forward so that we can not only budget for it, but plan for it. So happy to bring to you today, there have been the road rating program, but it has come with some pitfalls. There have been a lot of moving from, we started out, and we've got a PowerPoint that we'll hit on here in just a sec, but we did move from Streetwise, which is a DOT manual document that you fill out to do a road rating, to a program called Streetwise that we're now using, and we enter the data, and that automatically spits out a PCI, which is a pavement conditioning index, or pavement condition index, that automatically you enter the data, and it automatically spits out that number to you and shows you what the PCI is of that block. So just efficiency-wise, it was a fairly small purchase for that technology, but we have started using that. So what I'm going to show you today is the data that actually goes into Streetwise, and then we'll take a look at what actually comes out of, or not out of Streetwise, of Street Smart, that actually comes out of that, and what we actually are going to do with that. So if Chuck will load up that PowerPoint, we'll kind of move through it. So the first thing that we did was we took a look at the city and really figured we had to not take on this whole thing at one time. We had to really chop it up into smaller bites. So we created 11 districts throughout the city and really tried to look at area and amount of roadway within that area. So this is the map that shows the 11 districts that we did get the city of Shelton city limits into, and the roadways that are held within that. So once we got that established, we moved into, and not being able to see the screen, and my packet's not in order, so I'm going to turn around. What we moved into was identifying those streets, the street name. We did have an intern do a lot of this work for us that was then later spot checked by a full-time employee. We went back through about 40% of what was done by our intern. And we really did that through looking through all of the roadways, and with a senior employee that's been here over 20 years, he really went through and looked at them and said, does this make sense? And went road to road without actually going out to them, and then noted on them whether it made sense or not, and then went out and spot checked those individual locations. So entering the road name, length, and width to get the start on that information, and it shows you there on the DOT form. And then from there, went to, you look at several different factors, alligator cracking, longitudinal cracking, and transverse cracking. So we'll show you kind of what all of those means if you're not familiar with those terms. But then what that does is drives the deficiencies within the roadway. That is then calculated into a formula, which now we're not using the forms anymore. We punch that criteria into Streetwise, and it automatically spits out the number for us. It automatically calculates everything. And that's really what this is doing that we were doing manually before. So some of those distresses that you would see would be patching, utility patches. You have to take those into account. Normally, those start to separate over time. It creates issues with water down through the mat into the subgrade, which ultimately ends up being negatively affecting that roadway. Alligator cracking, same thing. Have quite a bit of that in a lot of our roads throughout Shelton, which really affect that water getting down into that subgrade. Longitudinal cracking, you'll see a lot of it when we call it hot lapping, when you pave and you don't hot lap, which means you don't keep a hot edge, and basically you're paving one lane at a time. You end up with a lot of this separation. You'll see it a lot of times. We try to get most of our contractors, same thing that we're doing right now with Downtown Connector. We're trying to not have any seams on Downtown Connector. We've tried to hot lap everything and keep a warm edge to tie into so that we don't end up with this on future projects. The others are cold joints that may be transverse cracks. So really those are a real small synopsis of the pavement conditions that are out there. Obviously there's a lot more than this, but with having a very short amount of time, just kind of going through those. The other things to consider are the functional class and also the surface type within that. So we've got basically 4 types of functional classes. A principal arterial, which would be your main roads, your main through town roads that don't have a lot of stops on them, it would be roads like Wallace Nealon Boulevard, would be principal arterials. Minor arterials, further on in this presentation, you'll see one of them, a road like 13th Street. It's really a roadway that leads into, out of the main center of town or activity, would be a minor arterial. A collector street would be a street off of that leads into a neighborhood. Much like Turner would be a good example of a collector street that leads into more of a residential, and our last one is a residential street leading through all of our residential areas.
Craig, quick question.
Yes.
That's a subjective qualification, or is there, trips? Defined trip
It's
rate?
not off of trips. It is off of a lot of interpretation, but it does give pretty good definition to what the criteria is for each one of those. And we do have all of our streets classified. Right now, we have been taking a look at those and reviewing those also, once again, with the road rating program. So some of those will change likely, just with growth and the amount of use, really, on those. So that then, with the WashDOT form, kicks out a pavement condition rating, which we are not using. We are using instead of a PCR, a PCI. So a little bit of difference just in the way that you use that. I'm not going to get into that today. It's some minor detail of how those are, and the classes really where you would do maintenance throughout both of those, the PCI and the PCR. And then we get that into what is our PCI breakdown, or breakpoints. And you can see different classes of roads have different really breakpoints of what treatment you're going to use, whether it be crack sealing, chip sealing, a double chip seal, or you're doing some sort of overlay or a full reconstruction. And you can see up in the top right corner there, it really breaks it down into five different levels of your streets, from very good down to the poor, which would be under 25 PCI, which would be a full reconstruction. And we go into our decision tree, and this document has this for every class or functional class of road. We just took a look at the arterial, and you can see that when you're going down through this, a very good road up at the very top gets a crack seal treatment, and then there's a cost associated with that. We did take a look at, originally, we thought through the streetwise system that their overall life expectancy and their costs were a little bit off for this region in this area. You can't, they just enter it in as a broad spectrum. You really have to take a look at that and change those parameters within that so that it gives you the right number. And we took a look at that with not only our engineering staff, but our consultant engineer and Gray and Osborne staff to establish the total life and the treatment and cost. So coming up with those then leads you to life expectancy, and that's where we've got this. Surface type, a little difficult to understand. AC, asphalt. The AC PCC is asphalt over concrete, so it'd be an overlay. AC over AC would be basically an overlay, so you'd have a couple 2 to 3 inches of asphalt with then a 2 to 3 inch overlay over the top of that, and then just concrete, and then the ST is chip seal. That would be just a shot of chip seal, and you can see what those life expectancies would be over the different functional classes of road. And then we get down to kind of the meat and potatoes of it. Yes.
Question on life expectancy.
Yes.
You're assuming new road with that with that material with standard maintenance, no maintenance?
Standard maintenance.
Standard maintenance,
Yes.
that's the life expectancy if you, new condition and you followed all the recommended steps?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
And you would, following those, you certainly are going to have, this would be standard maintenance. This wouldn't be going back through and actually saying, in 7 years on an arterial that we would do an overlay. This would be your standard crack sealing, things like that. It wouldn't take into consideration if we went and did a mill of the road and actually grinding it and then actually doing an overlay over the top of it. That would bring it back up to the life expectancy again of a full road. So that brings us to how far we have to go. This is a look at just 2019 per district. This is what we have right now out there. And you can see in 2019, the Mountain View area as far as maintenance goes, the most demanding at about 340,000 just needing to be done for chip seal or a double chip seal. And what we have identified right now, and this certainly can be council driven, but right now staff's recommendation would be we maintain what we have that's good out there right now. If we don't, we're going to end up in a situation where then it's going to cost even more, that if we don't chip seal some of this with a fairly limited budget right now, some of those roads that maybe were getting to a point where they needed an overlay, now we're going to need those where we might be able to sustain those with a chip seal and get some more life out of those before we have to go back in and do some of that major reconstruction. So with a fairly limited budget, this is where we're at right now, but we certainly would like to hear from the council of what direction you would like to see us go with knowing what the actual costs are. We do have a 10-year breakdown, which we could also provide you, that gives the overall number for the next 10 years, which would mean, like the mayor had mentioned, it would give you chip seal life cycle, then into overlays, and then also into reconstruction throughout a full life cycle of a roadway. That number was much higher. I think it was in the, I want to say it was in the 12 million. I could be wrong with that one. We'll bring it back to you at the next meeting. Just with that, we did break it up into a 10-year life and gave an overall cost over the next decade. This is just 2019 numbers. And obviously, with not doing maintenance on a lot of these this year, or even over the next couple of years, some of these that have a PCI rating of what would be 70 right now, which was a break point for chip seal, then all of a sudden drop below that, and now all of a sudden you're doing a thin overlay, which is, I want to say it was 5 to 6 times more than chip seal. So you can see how we defer maintenance, and it just ends up costing us more and more.
So financially, you drive a lot of this, not so much at Shelton, because I'm not sure if we have any, but drive in Tumwater and you see the cracks are sealed with kind of a rubbery, what do they fill the cracks with? Those are pretty efficient as far as lengthening out bringing out the length of, the year's life on the road.
They are. Anytime you can prevent that water from getting down into the subgrade, that gets down in, freezes, you have freeze thaw that creates more cracks, and anytime you can prevent that water from penetrating down into the subgrade, you are certainly extending the life. The issue with that is right now we have 1.5 employees budgeted in the street department. It takes somewhere upwards of about 7 or 8 employees to go out and do crack seal. It's a fairly labor-intensive activity. So priorities and maintenance of roadways, it certainly, all of a sudden we go out for a month and take 7 employees out there for a month, that eats up more than half of the street budget for employees.
So then what's the cost employee-wise to do chip sealing and overlay and all that.
Chip sealing, we're contracting out along with overlays also.
We couldn't contract out to do the cracks?
The crack sealing, not normally, not a lot. Certain contractors are going to come in and do that with chip seal. We do have a bid docs that went out yesterday for our 2019 chip seal. And this came really pretty late in the year as far as getting maintenance activities going. So we had to go ahead and get those out. We did identify, and we actually did a pretty good job. North Mountain View got all of the treatment. We identified Wallace Nealon Boulevard, Shelton Springs Road, and 13th Street, along with Northcliffe. It doesn't look like with the budget that we have for 2019 that we'll be able to get Northcliffe in there. It's one of our newer roads. It was the better condition of all of them. We did add it in there as a Schedule C, so that if bids do come in fairly low, we can go ahead and use that and go ahead and get that roadway done. But that did go out. We'll be opening bids here on the 26th for our chip seal maintenance for 2019, and then we'll have to take a look at or guidance from the council of whether we move forward with our 20 residential overlay blocks, or we move forward with some more chip seal and try to keep some of those roads that we already have out there that maybe don't necessarily need a full overlay.
Do we own the crack sealing equipment?
We do. We do. That equipment's about a decade old, but it's really good. A Crafco crack sealer.
Contract, I mean, we couldn't pull in other entities that have done that before to do that? Or is that a huge cost?
It would be a fairly significant cost.
Councilmember Nisco.
I mean, maintenance is important, but, I mean, people voted for the Transportation Benefit District, which is most of our road money, correct? For their roads to be fixed.
Along with REAP money and TIF money,
Yeah.
correct.
So, I mean, I think the 20 blocks is very important. I mean, the prior commission made a commitment for 20 blocks a year, and we should continue that, in my opinion.
So I'll comment on that. I don't believe that just arbitrarily picking 20 blocks. I think it's great that we have a metric to work off of now. We should be prioritizing the roads that need to be paved and not just picking a number out of a hat. I am kind of interested to know that number, $2.7 million to reconstruct all the roads that are very poor condition.
Now, that does not include our federally classified routes.
Okay.
So we didn't take into consideration a road like Wallace Nealon would be a perfect example. If we were to go in and reconstruct, well, a better example would be Brockdale Road in front of Springfield Court or Springfield Development. That is a federally classified functional roadway that is eligible for TIV funds. So we wouldn't go in and pave on our own dime something that could be paid for out of grant funding.
Okay.
It's actually, we're developing grant applications right now. We had Steve Gorchester, our consultant, in today and met with him and identified some projects. 13th Street, Brockdale, heading out past the four-way stop, was one of those roadways. It's eligible for the pavement preservation grant, which would pay for that road. So I guess taking into consideration, Councilmember Schmidt, we have a ton of classified roads. We are so lucky in Shelton. I don't know how we got them all, but other communities have a couple. We literally have dozens of them, which is great.
And don't disagree. The fact is, though, there is a finite amount of money that will come from TIB. At some point, the infrastructure we own within the city limits, we should be including that in the picture, is I guess my point. Whether we pursue it or not, it's a different story, but it should be included in the picture because Brockdale is in bad shape. And $2.7 million doesn't give us fresh pavement everywhere that we need fresh pavement. That's, I guess, my point. There's a lot of other areas that may not have been included there, but yeah, the thought there being, again, strategically maintaining the assets that we own, having a plan for that as we move forward is good. And I think this is a great start for that.
So if you do look at that though, you're looking at full reconstruction.
Right.
So that's only a road that is completely deteriorated.
Right.
So that's not something that would take maybe a thick overlay, something that can be saved. If you look, I mean, you're looking at just the reconstruction number, you're actually looking at about, if we were to go out this year and say we're gonna fix every road and bring it up to a PCI of 90 or above, you're looking at $6 million. It's a pretty substantial amount of money. And a lot of these, I mean, if you were to just go and look at a road like Olympic Highway North, it is a classified route, it is eligible for grant funding. But if we were to go do that on our own dime, that would really be an edge grind and an overlay. It wouldn't be a full reconstruction. So I think that's a little skewed as far as when you look at full reconstruction, that's only the ones that are below a PCI of 25.
Okay.
Anything above that would get either a thick or thin overlay. So the total number is almost 6 million.
But Craig, clarify Councilmember Schmidt's question, that the classified roads are not in this at all? Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
We tried to exclude anything that we thought, there are some that we had to include because they are federally classified and eligible for TIB, technically, but would never get funding. Like a road like Fogarty up on Capitol Hill. We've had TIB engineers in and looked at certain roads, and there are certain roads that they just said, there's no way we'd ever fund that. Puget Street is a great example. If you know where Puget Street is at, it's headed down towards the treatment plant. It's the last gravel road to your right as you head down the hill. It's a gravel road. The TIB engineers have said, there's no way we would ever fund that gravel road. We don't even know how it became a route. It doesn't connect really to anything, and they have said, we wouldn't fund something like that. So we tried to identify the ones, much like Railroad Avenue. We know that project is coming, we already have funding for it. So we tried to identify the ones that were likely to be grant funded and be projects.
So if I can clarify a little bit, I think what I hear council saying is that we want to see the information for all of the city assets regardless.
Yes.
And then provide a differentiator, just so you can see the difference during the next presentation.
Yeah.
And that number is not going to change. And like I said, I think we took them out of there. I'll have to clarify. I'll have to get that answer that question. I can't answer that right now, but I believe that we did take those out. But I don't think it's going to change or skew that number much.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of our classified routes are in decent shape, would be more of a chip seal type activity. And the ones we've identified, we've been chipping those off, like Turner Avenue, Railroad, things like 13th, that we have been getting those ones that are really bad that would qualify for TIB funding. So things like that, and then other ones, you know, activities like chip sealing and maintenance activities. But I'll certainly clarify that, and we'll bring that back to you. I'm unclear on right now answering that question and knowing that we actually took those out. So I'll clarify that and make sure that we bring that back to you.
Why is the reason that, I'm sorry.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
One thing that I would really like to see as a sort of report card is how many road miles we have at each PCI breaking point. I think that would be a really easy metric for us to show not only council, but the traveling public, the condition of our roads and how many of them. I don't know if you want to break that down into all of these districts, but I think even just a simple snapshot of, we estimate X road miles are at this PCI breaking point, et cetera. And I think year over year, or however often we revisit that, I think it's a good snapshot for us to view, are we making progress in some of these areas, especially as we enter budgeting? So that's something I would really like to see.
We have that already prepared.
Good.
I just didn't want to keep everybody until 9 o'clock tonight, but we'll certainly bring that back to you. But we already have that. We actually have it broken down by block. So we tried to take block sections. So in each category,
sure,
we have, because we have 63.3 3 miles, I believe, lane miles in the city of Shelton. We don't go by lane mile, we go by sections, and most of the sections are in blocks. So we can bring you back the number of blocks to show you how many in each district are within each category.
And I think as we talk about communicating out to the public too,
Yes.
that's really important to talk about the number of blocks at each road rating and how that dovetails with the funding that city council budgets for and what that means for the maintenance and ongoing development of our infrastructure.
Sure. And like I said, we already have that prepared. I just didn't want to take 2 hours of your time tonight. So we limited that down to the information. But we will certainly bring that back at the next meeting.
Councilmember Goodell.
So Puget Street, that's a through street. I mean, it goes from Fairmont on to another, it hooks into another. Why is that not ever going to be blacktopped? Or, I mean, people live on that, people go on that street.
We're not saying it's never going to be blacktopped. It would never be funded through a TIB grant.
So it's going to
It
be
is-
our own dime on those.
Yes, it is classified, but it's more of it's a residential street for all intents and purposes, and TIB does not fund residential streets. They're just not going to do that. Like Fogarty. Fogarty is the same thing. It's a residential street. How it ever became a functional route, I have no clue.
Yeah, but a lot of these are residential streets, aren't they? That are in those neighborhoods? So,
That are in the road rating, yes.
Right.
But I can bring you a map and show you, I'll bring a map the next, I've got one hanging in my
Okay.
office. We'll bring you a map and actually we'll send it out to you before we get to that meeting, and show you the federally classified routes that are eligible for TIB funding,
okay,
so that you can see those.
all right.
Question?
I'd just like to reiterate that the voters approved the Transmission Benefit District for their roads to be fixed, and we should honor our agreement there. And then what's left, maybe after the 20 blocks, we put into maintenance.
And so when we did the former commission, we can look back and they did identify the funding, the components that went into the decision.
There was a
making.
percentage, yes.
It was.
Like
It was a percentage of 65 to projects. It was, I believe,
30 and
30% to residential roads and 5% to multimodal, when it was voted on several years ago. That was something, but I don't necessarily know that, it doesn't really identify whether we're doing an overlay, though, or we're maintaining one of those residential streets. And that is something, I mean, with a chip seal or a thin overlay, that's something maybe that we don't get to a street that's completely falling apart, which I think what you're talking about, as opposed to maybe maintaining some of the stuff that we have now before it gets to the point where it's falling apart. So, but I don't think it really differentiated or designated money to just roads that were falling apart.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about what the people were told when they voted that in, and we should really take that into account.
Which I think we have done a great job.
We have,
of
but-
utilizing that money and leveraging that money to get the most dollars that we could.
But what I'm hearing here is
Over
maybe
the
we
last-
might be stopping that to do more maintenance and.
And I'm not
Yeah.
proposing,
Yeah.
that is really a council decision, and that's really the guidance that we would like to see is what would you like us to do? And this year, we've got $450,000 budgeted for
20 blocks.
transportation activities, whether that be maintenance or overlays. And an overlay truly is maintenance also. It's really the reconstructions that are really not classified as maintenance.
So another thing that we can bring back to you at our next meeting and potentially during briefings is take our budgeted number, the amount of funds we have, and then different ways in which we might be able to use that.
Yes.
And have council take a look at that and tell us what they think and what they would prefer.
Because last year, the 20 blocks was $200,000, I believe.
We're actually going to final acceptance of our residential blocks just over that.
Yeah.
I think it was 216,000 or in that 213, something in that neighborhood, yeah.
So we can make sure you have that
Yeah,
information.
I think
next
it's
time.
real important that we look at the whole list of needs for prioritization. And hopefully some of that will be residential blocks, and we'll have to make that decision. So, yeah.
And I guess just to clarify, that might not be as much of a decision this year, just because we are getting fairly late right now to go to bid for some of those. Not necessarily late to do overlay activities, but for chip seal, it is getting fairly late in the season. You want that to be done, you want to do crack sealing sometime like in May, let that set, and then do your chip sealing sometime in the heat of the summer, late July, August, in those timeframes. So to hit that window, going to bid now, it's going to be the end of the month before we get those back. Going through council process, it'll be June before we actually get a contract approved. So you can kind of see the time frame of that. So if we wait too much longer on that to make a decision, not saying that we can't, because we've only gone out to bid. We haven't signed anything yet, so we can go out to bid, see where those come in.
So
and then council can
we
make that
we
decision.
can go through those options.
And I think policy is something we can also discuss at the budget, because I think that's really looking ahead from here, understanding that the policy and the budget are going to drive one another, and we're going to have to be very cognizant of that because of the timing of all of these things.
Okay. I guess we concur to move this forward to May 7th for further
Yes.
consideration. Okay. Thank you, Craig.
You're welcome.
Okay, next business item is City Manager Jeff Knighton has information about an interlocal agreement with Mason Transit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. Mason Transit Authority has approached the city. Danette was here a few weeks ago showing a schematic and a plan view of what the Pear Orchard Park and Ride will look like, or might look like once it's eventually approved and constructed. And we have a picture of that up on the screen, and also in your packets to take a look at. The property is currently used as a parking lot. I believe there's an overhead plan view in your packet to show what that looks like. And what Mason Transit is planning to do is take that property and construct a facility that will contain 32 spaces with 30 standard spaces and then 2 accessible spaces. And then the agreement would provide for a 20-year term with the provision to renew the agreement at the end of that term for another additional 20 years. In exchange for the use of the property, which I said is currently used as a de facto parking lot, it's just gravel. Mason Transit would maintain the property to the standards and adopted city codes. We did have a pretty extensive presentation about this a couple weeks ago, but we have the terms of the agreement here, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff? Councilmember Schmidt?
I was under the assumption that they're gonna have some lighting and stuff in there. And will they be covering the cost of the utility payment within there?
That has not been specifically discussed. I can find that out prior to the next reading on May 7th. I do know they will have lighting. They will have other types of amenities at that location.
I was very encouraged to hear that they're gonna have lighting and security cameras and things like that, and to keep that area hopefully as nice as it looks like here for the long term. So just curious. Thanks.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, we could move this forward to May 7th. All right. Okay, that's, we move on to our action agenda. Has anyone signed up? Okay.
No.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
First up is Public Works Director Craig Gregory has information about the 6-year TIP.
So as we discussed in a prior meeting, the 6-year TIP, just really a planning mechanism moving forward. It identifies projects within the planning period of the next 6 years. It also drives our TIF fee with the total amount of projects listed. It hasn't changed much. The projects pretty much stayed the same. We had a slight reduction of, I believe, about $2 million in our identified projects. So if you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any additional questions tonight? Okay. We have a motion.
I move to adopt resolution number 1145-0219, the 6-year transportation improvement program for the years 2020 to 2025.
Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number,
Donna's trying to get your notes in.
you need to read it,
Read the
don't
resolution.
sorry about that.
Would you like me to do that now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Resolution number 1145-0219, a resolution of the City of Shelton, Washington, adopting the comprehensive 6-year transportation improvement program for the City of Shelton for the years 2020 through 2025.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now we have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 1145-0219, the 6-year transportation improvement program for the years 2020 through 2025. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, back to Craig for the 2018 residential paving project.
So I think we already touched on this one. Budgeted in 2018, we paved right around 20 residential blocks. It was a project that was through Granite Construction, and we are just asking for final acceptance of those residential blocks and this project.
Okay. Do you have a motion?
I move to accept the 2018 residential paving project and authorize the mayor and council to sign the final acceptance form.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to accept the 2018 residential paving project and authorize the mayor and council to sign the final acceptance form. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next or last action item is Department of Ecology Stormwater Capacity Grant Acceptance. Back to Director Gregory.
Thanks, Mayor and council members. This was something that was presented to us fairly late in the process. This had a date back to 2017. We weren't eligible for it until we were identified as a Phase 2 permit holder. So we just got this about 6 weeks ago, that we could even apply for this once we were identified as a potential permit holder. And once that was identified, they reached out, Department of Ecology reached out to us, telling us that we could apply. We did, and received a $25,000 grant that is associated with the Phase 2 stormwater permit that needed to be spent by the end of June. So not much time to get that done. It's a fairly broad grant that can be spent on a lot of different things, maintenance activities, equipment, things like that. We did look at spending this money on the purchase of the Vector truck and tried to float an idea of we don't have the Vector truck, but if we put a deposit down, could we spend the money on that? And that was a no from Department of Ecology. And then brainstorming, things like rate studies can be paid for out of this grant. So we did identify that as right now going through the rate study with the FCS group, and also having the ability to back charge for that. So getting the grant now and paying for activities through the rate study from the past over the last few months, they did tell us that was acceptable. So with this funding of $25,000, we will pay for about 93% of what was going to come out of the storm utility of the $27,380 rate study that FCS Group is performing. This grant will pay for about 93% of that.
Good.
Okay. Thanks, Craig.
You're welcome.
Have a motion.
I move to accept the biennial stormwater capacity grant and authorize the Public Works Director to sign the agreement with the Department of Ecology.
Second.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Okay. We have a motion and a second to accept the biennial stormwater capacity grant and authorize the Public Works Director to sign the agreement with the Department of Ecology. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we have our final general public comment. Just Mike?
Mike Olson.
Okay, and Mike Olson's come. He has a vision for a boardwalk down along the waterfront involving city property. And we're going to extend him additional time, up to 10 minutes, to present that to the council tonight.
Thank you. Mike Olson, I'm a city resident. Last week, I handed out brochures on our proposed project, and I'd just like to flesh out a few more of the details of it. It is city-owned property, so ultimately, we'll need your permission to build the boardwalk. In the meantime, we have yet to really launch soliciting funding for it, so kind of wanted to get a general feel over the next month or so as we start this. We will more than likely be asking for pledges rather than people giving us money, large chunks, and then not being able to complete the project. So as it moves forward, I'll keep updating things and speaking with staff. I've already kind of done a little bit of work on that. Let me talk a little bit about why we're doing this. As you went through the Tiny Homes Village, you heard from a lot of veterans. There's a lot of pain still with veterans. I'm a Vietnam veteran. Mike Fredson's a Vietnam veteran, and we talk with a lot of veterans, and we feel that this is a worthy project for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of veterans in Mason County, and there's no real recognition of them other than the cemetery. And so if you go to most small towns, there's a lot of towns that have a memorial dedicated to veterans. And if you've ever been to one to see, somebody's father, brother, whatever, who's deceased in war and has an engraved plaque, it's a real healing spot. So that's how we kind of started this project, was feeling that there's it's beneficial to the spirituality of the community. So we embarked on this because this also is a project that's been undertaken 20 years that they wanted to do this boardwalk. So it's actually a vision of the city to complete this, and it ties in with Mason Transit's doing the park and ride. So there's a certain amount of mobility that can bring people from the marina into downtown Shelton. This is going to be all volunteer built, funded not by the city. We will be bringing things to the city that we would need funding for, such as permitting, possibly a parking area, pretty minor amounts in a project that we think will be close to $250,000. We want to solicit donations from not only individuals, but also large corporations, of course, the usual suspects that get hit all the time. But we also have a connection with a number of veterans groups, Disabled American Veterans, American Legion, that we spoke to preliminary about this, and we've gotten good feedback that we think that we can do this. This would never happen any other way. This city certainly can't afford to do this. When the design was made, I don't know if anybody remembers, some of them do, Gary Wood and Kathy, that you had to give grant money back because we were unable to afford to do this. And, we just believe that this is a worthy project for the city to undertake in a partnership with us. We don't have a lot of, where there's only basically Mike Fredson and I are leading this effort. We are doing it in conjunction with Mason County Historic Society. They are the 501c3 that we can do this under, so that it is a benefit to corporations or businesses who would give us money. The design has already been pretty much done and approved. The city purchased a design for the actual boardwalk. So a lot of the heavy work has been done already. The heavier work will be coming up with the money. And we just wanted to make sure that in some sort of a way we can get some guidance or direction, or at least a vote of support from the city as we move forward. We wouldn't be asking for anything from the city until we can demonstrate that we can pull this off. because I know in the past there have been projects that were started with blessing of the city, and the city expended money, and then the projects failed. We don't want to do that. We want to be able to really pull this off and then go to the city and say, look, we've done this. Can you do a small part that we would ask of you, specifically paying for the permit, staff time. As I mentioned, there would be some, I spoke with Craig, some stormwater issues. I'm sorry, back up a little bit. Does everybody know where I'm talking about that this is going at? Between Lumberman's and the pump station, heading through the pear orchard over to the new park and ride. It is city-owned property. I don't believe we have to do any surveying. If so, that would be something else we would ask the city to participate in. Some sort of a handicap, possibly parking area to be able to, people to get to, be disabled vets to be able to take advantage of this. I guess I've touched on about everything I can sort of think of on this that to let you know where we're at with it. It is going to take a while. We know that this won't happen until next year, more than likely, if we can work through the winter and summer and get the funding. Ideally, we would like to dedicate it maybe like in 2020 on Veterans Day, if we can pull this off. It's going to be a huge undertaking because not only of the amount of funds we have to get, but the labor to do it. I'm still a sort of a contractor. I am retiring, but I have a lot of friends, a lot of veteran friends that we'll be depending on. We've already spoken with Mark about how the volunteer process works, so the city would have no liability on that. We're trying to cross all of our bridges before we involve the city, even though it is your land, or our land. If there's any strong objections to it, we'd like to hear it before we really get underway with asking for donations. One of the parts of what we're going to do is have people buy a plaque, an engraved plaque for their veteran in Mason County that will be inlaid into the boardwalk. They'll be granted engraved plaques. So I guess I hit about everything I can think of. I don't want to take up too much time. You've had a long meeting, but I appreciate you mulling this over, and I'm available. You all know where I can find me anytime to speak with me. But we think this is a really nice idea to do for the city, not only for the veterans but for the community. I mean, it's something that we don't have that here. Does anybody know where there are any memorials in town for veterans? Maybe there's one little one by the post office, and that's it. And as you read in the brochure, all of us veterans came back here and raised families and built this community all the way back from the Spanish-American War to present. So I think it's time we honored the veterans. And I think this is a great way to doing it that not only honors them, but benefits the community with a actual boardwalk through a historic site. So I'll leave it there. If anybody wants to talk to me later, look me up. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike, for your vision. Just keep in contact with our
I
staff.
will, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, I'm real tight talk.
Mike, do you have any idea how many veterans there would be
In Mason County?
on the boardwalk?
Well, it's going to be about 700 feet long, the boardwalk, and we've kind of figured out we can do, I think, 6 per board. So
What,
do the
300?
math. We've got about 800 boards,
Okay,
so
okay,
5,000, 4,000,
yeah,
something like that.
all
So
right.
we got lots of room.
Thanks, Mike.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, lastly, City Manager's report from Mr. Knighton.
Thank you. I'll try to keep this relatively short, and I'll go over a couple items while Chuck is bringing up my very short PowerPoint. First thing I wanted to mention, very happy with all the work that's been done on Olympic Highway North. We were able to get the road open on time. Our Public Works Department worked very hard to make that happen. Still have a couple of areas that need to be cleaned up, and you might have noticed there were flaggers out there yesterday and part of the day today, and what they were doing is finishing up on the sidewalks. That will be periodic over the next couple weeks, not for very long at any one time, just to double check on the things that were installed and make sure they're functioning appropriately in the way that they're supposed to be functioning. A couple of dig outs, things like that, to make sure the work was done right. Secondly, I did want to mention Spotlight Shelton. And on 5/1, May 1st, here at 6 o'clock, we'll be going over a few things along with our new community service officer, code enforcement officer, animal control officer. We'll have to get her 3 hats, 3 different colors. And she and the police department and Director Ziegler will be talking about code enforcement, and then we'll have a good conversation, hopefully, with a lot of the folks that live here, and maybe can give us some ideas on things we can do and do better than we have been. Almost last. Tonight is Mr. Collins' last meeting with us. John will be moving on to a different firm and working on appeals, I believe he said, which I can't imagine would be near as much fun as being here with us. But he thinks differently. So Kathleen, with her firm, I think you all know her, will be here to help us out. 1 meeting a month. She has other commitments, so we'll be working on that to make sure that works as well as it ought to be. But I appreciate John being here. He's helped me out a lot, and I'm sure he's helped out all of us a lot. So there's that. And then, borrow the PowerPoint thing. Oh, thank you. So a couple of you mentioned during your council reports that we had communications interviews coming up next week. This is part of that, and one of the things, I just wanted to share a brief update on the project. In an effort to focus on one of the council's strategic goals that we talked about for accountable government, we're developing a plan to proactively deliver, easy for me to say, proactively deliver effective internal and external communication plans to the public, and that is part of this strategy. The project scope, we want to review and evaluate our existing communications tools and practices, including comparing our tools to other jurisdictions with best practices. We want to make sure we're in compliance with all the relevant statutes, Public Records Act, Open Public Meetings Act, those types of things. We wanted to make sure we know what our organizational capacity is, and enhance our communication efforts, not only internally, but with the community at large, and make sure that their community at large is up to date about what's happening in the city and providing us with ideas. Here are our consultants. They are based out of Seattle, and Mull Foster Alongi is a firm that I have a lot of experience with, although not necessarily their communication staff. They are a planning and engineering and architecture firm as well, but this is their communication staff based in Seattle that will be helping us out. They have a lot of experience in the communications field and developing plans for cities just like ours. Project timeline, that's a little bit difficult to see, but first big activity, again, is the interviews with our council members at a one-on-one basis throughout the day on the 24th, and also with all of our department heads to talk about roles and strategies for communications purposes. After the interviews, Mull Foster will work through the assessment of our communication strategy with, in comparison to other jurisdictions surrounding us. And then we'll have regular coordination meetings and council briefings with MFA as well. And lastly, well, that's me, but not lastly, that's communication strategy in a nutshell. You'll learn more on April 24th. If you have any questions, let us know. That's all from me. I did want to turn it over to Director Gregory real quick to talk about WIRA and how that acronym will impact all of our lives.
So if you don't know, I am the city's, your representative on the WIRA 14 committee, planning committee, and that is a water resource inventory area. It was established by the State Department of Ecology quite some time ago. And really, the activities are being driven by the Hearst decision ultimately, and exempt wells and the water that's taken out of the ground for those. And really, this is to keep it very short, a planning committee to replace water for water in like kind. So basically, anything we're pulling out of the ground, whether it be, any exempt well, whether it be a Class A, B system, or just a residential exempt well, replacing that water back into the aquifers that have deficiencies. We have a couple of them within the WIRA 14 area, which is our area of Goldsboro Creek and also Johns Creek. So identifying projects that will help not only replace the water in those, which ultimately ends up benefiting salmon recovery. But this process is a very long process, but just identifying those projects for moving forward. We did get some grant funding out of this that we will be bringing to you already in the early planning stages in conjunction with the Squaxin Island Tribe. A couple of those projects that have already been identified is the expansion of the reclaimed water tank out at the satellite wastewater treatment plant and the start of design of that. And also the sewer facilities plan that's running in conjunction with our water comp plan, or not our water comp plan, our sewer comp plan, that is identifying projects that are needed within our facilities to redirect and take the Mountain View area sewage to divert it from the main plant up to the satellite plant, and what that would take as far as infrastructure goes to create reclaimed water, which we would put back into basically the headwaters of Goldsboro Creek, which are located out next to the prison, which is where we already have the reclaimed spray field. Converting that reclaimed spray field into a water source well that would go directly into the ground, that would eliminate things like evaporation and uptake from vegetation. So basically utilizing that more into the aquifer and not losing that to the atmosphere and plants. But just wanted to give you an update of that. Happens every the first Thursday of every month. It's about a 4.5 hour meeting the first Thursday of every month. So pretty good undertaking, along with some subcommittees and some other things, but it is a very good and productive planning committee identifying projects. So if we bring something to you, likely with sewer, that's what we'll be driving at. I'd love to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Craig? Okay, thanks, Craig. That it, Jeff?
That's all I have.
All right,
Since we have about
5 minutes.
5 minutes since we brought Mr. Patty, and we've got Chief Moody to maybe address the biggest complaints about Olympic Highway and Alder, about the fire trucks and the police cars.
Can do that.
Okay.
That would be good.
I mean, I'm sorry the press left, that would be
Asking
nice.
you to address Facebook blogs and things that are getting on the internet.
And the phone calls and the.
Can we prosecute Facebook crimes? No?
Mike, you're welcome to come up and tag on to this. But as I mentioned to Jeff about some of these issues that people are raising, those issues have been here for years, okay? They're nothing new. In fact, that road is wider than North Cliff is. And Highway 3, I mean, you look at those all over the state, all over the country of 2-lane roads that have that effect. What this will prevent is the head-on collisions that occur down that street that I've seen since I've been here. And the reality is if there is a wreck on there, will it close the street? Yes, it always has. And until you can tear away that road and go away on the other side and make it a 4-lane highway coming down through there, That's the reality. Highway 3, when there's a wreck on Highway 3, as you well know, it closes Highway 3. All out in Union, there's those roads that go through there. When there's a landslide, it closes it. The reality is it's less than a half mile, I think, up the S-curve.
Just a little bit more. It's about 3,000 feet.
So, and sometimes as we do as police officers and emergency vehicles, it's faster to get from A to B without your lights and siren. And it doesn't clog traffic sometimes. And we choose where we make traffic stops. People say, well, how are you going to stop people up there? We're not. If at all avoidable, we follow them up till they get to the top or to get to the bottom. And then we stop them in a safe environment for us as well as them. So, I mean, we can be pessimistic about this or be optimistic and look at the good work that's been done up there. And again, those center divides, I can tell you in just the short time I've been here, and the lifelong residents can tell you more, the head-on collisions that have occurred in that area were bad. And they shut that road for hours or even a day at a time. And this will, nothing's going to eliminate, this will dramatically decrease those. So there's my Facebook post for the day, since I don't have Facebook.
Is there a microphone you can drop?
And I could address the fire truck thing, but it's going to be similar.
2 years ago, when we started talking, Craig and I sat around the table, and if you folks want to point fingers, I'm the one that said, yeah, we need to have this. We did some modifications to the planters in the middle, but our fire trucks go up and down Olympic Highway North just fine. When they opened it up, I took what we commonly are referring now to as Big Bird, the hook and ladder truck, went up and down the hill. It works just fine. And as has been before, when we're going up the hill with red lights and siren, people, as they have going up Turner, as they have going up Harvard, they don't stop. There's no place to pull over on those roads either. They go until they can find a wide spot in the road, and then they move out of our way. This is not new business. The fire trucks will respond as we always have, and I don't see this as being a big problem. I tried to voice that on Facebook and pretty much got slammed down, so I just backed out of it. So it's not a problem for the fire department. We'll maintain. Matter of fact, we have kind of entered into an agreement with Fire District 11 on the north side up in Island Lake, and they're responding with us now, like with Shelton High School and the Wallace Nealon place. So if anything, the responses in that area is going to be even better than it's been before. So
Great.
Can I answer any questions?
I just wanted to hear it.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Chief.
for me, it's going to be way better than Northcliff.
Got slammed down on Facebook.
Okay, with that, we have 2 minutes, and Councilmember Krantz does have
I'm
a,
going to try and put this in 2 minutes. Thank you. Well, there's something that occurred with the three-person commission that I do not believe that this seven-person commission was fully aware with how certain things came down. So I've been in communication with our city manager about a subject, and I just wanted to air out exactly how something happened so that we can make a decision on how we want to move forward. When we went from the three-person commission to the seven-person council, we kind of had a limited amount of time to come up with how much y'all get paid. And what I was told is that we needed to set a temporary salary so that once the council got in place, we would set a salary commission to determine what the salary for the council would be. That it was never really the idea that we were coming up with a salary for the seven-person council. We were coming up with a figure that could be used until we all got in place, and then we were to appoint a separate organization, a separate committee called the Salary Commission. And that would take place after we got in. But after we all got in, this has just been kind of out there, and I've talked to Jeff a little bit about it, but I don't care if you do it or you don't do it, but what was told to me is the number that we gave was just, okay, this is our best idea. But in order to be fair to us and you and the citizens, is if you have a salary commission that sets a salary for this group, then our hands are out of it and they determine it. So I don't know, you were a lawyer, but maybe you were in that discussion at all?
Yeah, I actually, one of my very first projects for Shelton was I helped Kristen French through this whole framework of salary commissions. And a lot of cities adopt salary commissions for that exact reason, which is that you essentially have a separate entity determine what the salary of the council members will be, or what sort of stipend they're going to get for doing their work as a council member. And obviously, there's like Councilmember Cron's noted, there's that separation avoids the sort of self-interest that a council might otherwise be tempted by trying to set their own salaries. The other thing is you can't reduce a council person's salary once they've taken their seat. And so there was this, when the government changeover happened, we realized from a legal standpoint, we had to set the salary of the new council members before they sat down. Otherwise they might, they would essentially be getting paid what the commission members had been making at the time.
John, can I interrupt for a second?
Oh, yeah,
I have a
sorry.
motion to extend the meeting 5 minutes.
So
please.
moved.
Yeah, this
All
this
in
one-
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, but I remember this exact problem because I remember helping Kristen French with it. The issue was, from a legal standpoint, if the city didn't set a new salary for council members, when the new council members were elected and sat, they would immediately have been making the salary of what the three commissioners were making at the time. And from a budget standpoint, that didn't really make sense. And so, because we wouldn't have been able to change it after they'd been elected, we essentially said that the legal way to do it was to basically pass a new salary ordinance setting that salary, and then later on, if you wanted to have a salary commission to basically do everything, do the whole salary, song and dance for you, then you would set it up. But that's not obviously the case in all cities. A lot of cities don't have salary commissions, but I will say it's very, very common, specifically for the reasons that Councilmember Krantz identified.
So
Go ahead.
I imagine there's
Deputy
probably
Mayor.
a lot of thoughts surrounding the subject. Maybe this is something that next time we have a study session, we can shortly discuss as part of the agenda, rather than continue tonight's meeting, give everyone a chance to get their thoughts about it and then come back and discuss.
Beg to differ with council person on my left. But we have an election coming up here. And I think it would be prudent for us to at least make the steps necessary that this was something that we were doing, because I think people that are running for those positions might want to know what that is. If we don't have the number, at least they know that this group didn't make the salary that we had a salary commission. So I would think that we should move forward with doing that, whether it took a motion or whatever, but I would say we need to make the decision. So. I
Well,
mean,
if we have council members feel that strongly, then we need to put it as an agenda item and discuss it at maybe our next meeting. City Manager Knighton brought it up to me, and I was not in favor of moving it forward at that time, but that was my opinion. And so if we have a group that wants to move it forward, then we should move it forward, or at least get it on the agenda.
And again, just from my standpoint of being the person that set that, one of the people that set that salary, it was sold to us as a temporary, because that we would then get a salary, but it was that this group would come up with the concept of the salary commission. Now, whether I was sold wrong, I'm just letting you know what I was told, and it made sense to me because I didn't feel comfortable coming up with the salary to begin with. Commissioner McDowell might remember, this is the conversations we had in making up how that kind of, it was a temporary salary. And so temporary is like 7 or 8 months now, probably, but it's just been on the back burner. But because we do have an election coming up, I think that we ought to move forward with it, whether we do it at the next meeting or we do it now. So
we're not going to do it now.
Yeah, it's too late to do it now. But it could be set for discussion.
But do we have a consensus on the council that we want to consider it as an official agenda item to set up to discuss that issue?
I think, yeah.
I think
We need
so.
to discuss it.
Okay, I have 3 yeses.
To discuss it?
Study session.
Just move it forward for discussion?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it should maybe be set for a study session, is what it sounds like. That sounds like the next step.
Right.
Here.
I was just going to clarify, study session or agenda item, it sounds like a study session would be most appropriate. We do have the planning and building, which I was wrong tonight, it only took about a half hour. I think that discussion may take a little bit longer. But we can absolutely add that to the 5-7 meeting, and then if we're not able to get to it, then we would have to move it to the following meeting, which I think is the 21st. But we can certainly add that and get to it, have that discussion at the May 7th meeting.
Well, certainly, I'm not in favor of adding meetings for the sake of meetings. We don't have anything scheduled on next Tuesday, the 23rd. We used to meet every Tuesday. I'm not saying that we need to get back to that habit, but if we're concerned about having enough time to discuss the master fee schedule, which I think is something that we need to take our time and understand, and I don't want to cut this conversation short either, that might be another alternative to consider. If I may, we need to move to extend the meeting for an additional 5 minutes.
So I will explore the opportunity.
Okay, all in favor of extending the meeting 5 minutes?
I thought we did it for an hour when we
No,
did it
I
last
said
time.
5 minutes.
Oh, you did? You didn't know this was gonna go for an hour, did you? Okay,
So-
whatever's
Sorry, Jeff.
legal, let's do the legal thing. Okay.
So I think if the council would like to meet and do a study session on the salary commission topic next Tuesday, we need to make sure that we can provide notice for that, for public notice. But I have some information that is already available that I can provide. We can certainly develop more as we, over the course of the next couple days, to provide council with some, at least things to discuss.
So I'm going to have to ask for excusal from that. I will not be in town. However, if we're going to be discussing it, I very much want to be part of the discussion.
Okay.
Because I have some concerns with this, but to be discussed. Well,
April 30th is another alternate date we could look at. That's a 5th Tuesday. There's not anything currently scheduled. That would give staff a little more time to gather information.
I don't want to single out Councilman Schmidt, but.
Well, I'm one of 7, so I mean.
Right.
I know, but.
I understand.
But you want to be here. You have.
I would like to, but I also don't
If we
want
can
to.
schedule.
So I hear.
On our schedule, I'd like to have all our council members there because it is an
Agreed.
important topic.
So I hear
We're gonna move
consensus
forward.
that we do want to do a study session.
Yes.
Yes.
That we do want to have all the council members there,
If possible.
and everybody is available April 30th.
Yep.
Yes, that's a lot. That's a little bit further out than next week, so, yes.
So
April 30th at
Say
6.
April 30th, 6 o'clock.
And everybody else?
6 o'clock is fine.
Is there a city meeting that night?
No.
No.
Everybody good with that?
Yeah.
I guess. I wish we should have this conversation a couple of months ago. I didn't know how we would do it, but I just realized that the election's coming up, and people that run for this office should, if the salary's gonna change, they should know it, so.
Filing week begins May 13th, so it's just around the corner.
Really?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
do we, I hate that belittle the point, do we really, I know that Joe really wants to be part of the discussion, but should we, if the filing date is May 13th, should we not have this discussion on the 21st so that we could vote on something on the 30th?
Well, I don't think
Well,
a salary
30th is a
commission.
special
I don't think the salary,
We're not going to have time.
what date's the election again? Does anybody know?
November.
That's
November.
November.
Oh,
Not till September.
Well, August is the primary,
Yeah.
Right.
but you're not going to get a salary
Yeah,
commission
I mean,
set up
it's,
in a.
I mean,
Not gonna happen
it would
by
be,
May.
it would be unlikely, that a salary commission would be up and running and actually enact a new salary before November anyway.
think
So
it's the action-
I think it's, yeah, I mean, it's possible, but I'm just highly skeptical that would actually impact.
No.
I like things moving quickly. I don't think there's any way we could even decide on the salary commission by May for sure. It just won't happen. So I don't think 1 week in the study session delay is an issue.
I think April 30th.
So
Sounds good.
okay, April 30th,
All
study
right.
session, 6 o'clock.
Sing your boxing gloves.
Okay.
Right here.
Now, we have 1 minute left for any other.
I got
issues.
nothing.
We are adjourned. Next meeting is May 7th, Tuesday at 6 o'clock.